Everybody, I wanted to record a brief lesson explaining the idea of utility maximization. Um, and I'm using this worksheet that I assigned for homework. So the idea here is that we're trying to get the most utility or satisfaction from a given amount of money or a given budget, sometimes called a constraint. So in this case, we have a constraint of $26. This is TJ has $26 to spend. And hypothetically, TJ can choose between buying apples or bananas or some combination of apples and bananas. And we're given prices of apples, $4, and prices of bananas as $2. So the basic idea here and what we call the profit maximizing rule is that we're trying to spend our resources in a way where the marginal utility or additional utility, and I'll talk more about that in just a moment, of apples per dollar spent on apples. So I'll say marginal utility of apples per dollar spent on apples. So I'm going to divide it by the price. Needs to be equal to the marginal utility of bananas divided by the price of bananas. If this is true and we've spent all of our money, then we are in fact maximizing our utility. We're getting the most utility we can from the money we have available to us from our budget. If this is not true, however, if say the marginal utility of bananas divided by the price of bananas is greater than the marginal utility of apples divided by the price of apples, then what we ought to do is purchase more bananas or consume more bananas and therefore purchase or consume fewer apples. So this is all about the optimal combination of apples and bananas to maximize our utility. I'm going to walk you through how we do this problem here. So first of all, you're given some number of apples that can be purchased, 1 through 7, and the amount of utility or total utility that you would get from consuming that number of apples. So if you purchase and consume 1 apple, you'll get 56 utils of satisfaction. If you buy or eat 2 apples, you'll have a total of 104. So we can think about that. If you buy the first apple, and we're going to assume that if you buy no apples, you get no utility from apples, of course. So if you buy 1 apple, your utility goes from 0 to 56. So we can just kind of assume that there's a 0 sort of listed up here with 0 apples. So going from 0 to 56 is an increase of 56. And so we're going to put a 56 over here because this is our marginal or additional utility of apples from consuming 1 additional apple. As we continue to add apples to our cart, going from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and so on, our total utility continues to rise. We're getting more satisfaction the more apples we eat. We like apples, and more apples makes us happier. However, and this is important, each additional apple increases our utility by smaller and smaller amounts. So the second apple raises our utility from 56 to 104. That's an increase of 48 utility points or utils, which is less than we got from the first. So the second apple satisfies us, but it doesn't satisfy us as much as the first apple did. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to calculate the marginal utility of apples by simply subtracting the total utility of apples from the previous total utility when we had 1 fewer. Or another way of saying it is, how much is our total utility changing by every time we eat an apple? So this third apple is an increase of 32 utils. Going from 136 to 160 takes us up by 24. The fifth apple gives us 20 utility points. The sixth apple is satisfying up to 16 utility points. And the seventh apple gives us 12 more utility points. Another thing to think about with marginal utility, if you were to keep a running total of marginal utility, if you added these up going down the column, if you buy the first one gives you 56 utils for a grand total of 56. The second one gives you 48 more utils for a grand total of 104. So 56 plus 48 is 104. Add in another 32, it takes you up to 136 and so on. So if you add this column of marginal utility, it will equal the total of total utility at that number of apples. I'm going to skip the marginal utility of apples per price of apple for now. Let's go over and do the bananas column. So same idea here. If we eat no bananas, we assume we get no utility. Eating one banana increases our utility to 32. So that means the first banana, eating one banana, gave us 32 utils. Eating two bananas gives us a total of 60 utils, meaning the second banana increased our utility from 32 to 60. That's a total of, or that's a change of 28. So the second banana added 28 points of utility to us. The third banana is a gain of 24 utils. The next one is 20. Then we increase by 12, by 10, and by 8. All right. Now let's think about doing some shopping. If we had $26 to spend and we wanted to buy one thing, what would we buy? Well, it looks like apples would be the best thing to buy because that first apple would give us 56 points of utility. It's extremely satisfying. First banana would be nice, 32 points, but it's not as satisfying as the 56. But hold on a second, before we go ahead and buy that apple, we have to think here, we do have to pay for the apple, and we have a price of apples at $4. So we don't in life always go and purchase the thing that gives us the most satisfaction. If we did, I'd be driving a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. Of course, we also consider what things cost or how much we have to pay for them. So what we want to do is we want to take the utility, the marginal utility we're going to get from this first apple, and we want to divide it by the price to bring us to some sort of measure of satisfaction per dollar spent. You might think of this as getting the most bang for your buck. We really want to get something out of the money we spend. So 56 divided by 4 takes us to, I believe, 14. So that's 14 points of satisfaction per dollar spent. And just for comparison, let's jump over here and look at the banana. This is 32 utils, but we're going to spend $2 to get those 32. So 32 divided by 2 is 16. So it turns out that that first banana actually gives us more satisfaction per dollar that we spend on it than that first apple. So if you're looking to get the most use from your money, you might consider buying a banana instead of an apple. Even though the apple is more satisfying, it costs more, and it may not be worth the extra cost. So let's go ahead and continue these two columns to get these numbers, and then we'll come back and start thinking about what to buy and how much of each. So I'm simply going to take the marginal utility and divide it by the price at each quantity of apples. So 48 divided by 4 is 12. 32 divided by 4 is 8. 24 over 4 is 6. 20 over 4 is 5. 16 divided by 4 is 4. And 12 divided by 4 is 3. So this column is telling us how many utils per dollar we're going to get from each one of those apples. Now for bananas, we're going to divide everything by the price of bananas, which is $2. So 28 divided by 2 is 14. 24 divided by 2 is 12. 20 over 2 is 10. 12 over 2 is 6. This one is 5 and 4. All right, now we can begin to think about doing some shopping. So all we're going to buy is apples and bananas. We want to know how many of each to purchase. And we have $26 to spend. I'm going to go ahead and write 26 right here because I want to make sure I don't overspend, and I want to make sure that I do spend all of my money. So we're going to think very methodically here. We're going to think about, should we buy one apple or one banana to begin with? And we discussed earlier that the first banana, even though it only gives us 32 points of utility, which is less than 56, per dollar, we're getting more from our dollars when we buy that first banana. So I'm going to go ahead and circle this just because it's going to remind me that I'm going to purchase it. 16 is more than 14, and that's 14 is what we get from the first apple. So I'd rather buy a banana rather than buy an apple to begin with. Now that's going to cost us $2, so I'm going to go ahead and take $2 off what we have left in our wallet. And now we have to make another decision. So now we're looking at either buying an apple, it would be our first apple, which would give us 14 utility points per dollar, or our second banana. A second banana will give us 14 utility points per dollar as well. So we're truly indifferent here. We could purchase either one and we'll come out just the same. And you might say, well, why not buy the one that costs less, the banana? And the truth here is that we've already divided by dollars. So we really have this on a, no pun intended, but an apples to apples comparison. So you can literally pick either one of these. and it won't make a difference. So I'm just going to pick the first apple here, but I really could have picked the first banana and we'd be okay. So that first apple is going to cost us $4, so we better take $4 out of our wallet. Next, we're going to pick between a second apple for 12 utility points per dollar or a second banana at 14. And we're always going to purchase the item that gives us more utility per dollar when given the choice. So that's going to take us to $18 left because it's a $2 banana. Now we're back to that point of indifference between our second apple and our third banana. So I'm going to go ahead and pick the third banana just to change things up this time, but I could have picked the second apple. It wouldn't make a difference. So now we're down to 16. And we want to keep going until we spend all of our money, continuing to purchase the thing that gives us more utility per dollar each time. So our second apple, and that's going to cost $4 because that's the price of apples. So it takes us to 12. Now we're down to a fourth banana for 10 utils per dollar. That's better than our third banana, or third apple rather. And now we've got the third apple giving us 8 utils per dollar. Takes us down to 6. Now we're indifferent, and again, you could pick either one. I'll go ahead and pick bananas. My pen is over here. It really doesn't make a difference. Takes us to 4. And at this point, we're going to pick this apple versus another banana because we'll get more from it. And that apple will cost $4, which empties our budget. Now we have spent all of our money. We are currently purchasing 5 bananas, and we are purchasing 4 apples. And is this rule true? Have we met the rule? So we've spent all our money. That is true. And currently, at our current level of consumption, 4 apples and 5 bananas is our marginal utility of apples divided by the price of apples equal to the marginal utility of bananas divided by the price of bananas? And the answer is yes, because 6, which is at our current level of consumption, 6 marginal utils per dollar spent on apples is equal to 6 marginal utils per dollar spent on bananas. So we are, in fact, meeting this rule, and so we are maximizing our utility. So we should purchase 4 apples and 5 bananas. What is the maximum amount of total utility that we can generate? Well, we know it's when we purchase 4 and 5. So how much utility are we getting here? When we purchase 4 apples, we are getting 160 utils from those 4 apples. We got 56 from the first, 48 from the next, 32 from the third, and 24 from the fourth, for a grand total of 160. So 160 is the amount of utility that we're getting from apples. And from bananas, we're getting 116. So I'm going to write that down here as an addition problem, bringing us to a total of 276 utils. Okay. What happens to the total utility if he purchases 2 more units of bananas and 1 fewer apple? So in other words, what if we cut back, put an apple back, saving us $4, and allows us to buy 2 more bananas? So we could afford that, right? We could purchase 3 apples and 7 bananas. If we did that, we'd be at 136 for apples, and we'd be at 134 for bananas, and that would be a total of 270, okay, which is less than 276. And then this last question here says, well, what if he purchases 2 fewer units of bananas and 1 more unit of apples? And that's in relation to the profit, or to the utility maximizing combo. So in other words, what if we went up here to 5 apples and we cut back to 3 bananas? This is just to prove that we are, in fact, maximizing our utility. We could afford 5 apples and 3 bananas, and that would give us 180 utils from apples. It would give us 84 from bananas for a total of 264, which again is less than our maximum of 276. So this is how you go about figuring out, when given all this data, how to maximize your utility. Again, one important note here, and I want to just kind of illustrate this. I'll select a different pen color because we're getting quite a bit on here, is what if at our current level of consumption, this equation up here in the corner was not true? What if this was not true? Well, where is an example where that's not true? One of these examples we did here would show that not to be true. So let's just take a look real quick at 5 apples and 3 bananas. Now we can afford that. That would use up all $26. But you'll notice here that if we were currently consuming 5 apples, our marginal utility per dollar of apples is 5. And if we were consuming 3 bananas, our marginal utility per dollar spent on bananas is 12. So we could say that 12 is greater than 5, right? 12 is greater than 5. They're not equal to one another. And because of that, because they are not equal to one another, the rule here, and the way to remember this, is just think of that old video game from the 1980s, Pac-Man. And what do we want to do? We want to eat more of the bigger one. What does that mean? What does 12 represent? 12 represents utils per dollar from bananas, and we want to eat more bananas. So we would want to increase the number of bananas that we're consuming, and then, of course, we would have to decrease the amount of apples because we don't have enough money for 5 apples if we eat, not 5 apples, but, well, it would be 5. We wouldn't have enough for 5 apples if we ate more bananas. So because 12 marginal utils per dollar for bananas is greater than 5 marginal utils per dollar for apples, we want to eat more bananas, moving this way down the banana quantity line here, and we want to eat fewer apples. And indeed, that would be correct, right? Because we're ultimately, we already figured this out, we're aiming for this level here, 5 bananas, and this level of 4 apples. So if you find that these two are not equal to one another, then now you know what to do, how to change our consumption to try to get us to a maximum utility. All right, hope that helps you.